Welcome to Getting Ghosted. This is an Intuitive Soul Collective podcast, and I'm your host, Allie Horner. Welcome back, everyone. Allie here. So I wanted to do a listener story or listener question episode because we haven't done any of those yet, and I thought that sounded like a lot of fun. That's what I was being nudged towards. So today you're going to hear some of the questions and stories that have come in, and I look forward to seeing your reviews about the podcast and what you think of all these. So remember that as with anything that's put on my podcast, these are just the things that I am feeling coming through. You may have your own insights, intuitions, channeled wisdom, etc. Feel free to share those with me if you feel called, or if any of these, if anything I channel or bring through on the podcast opens up more questions for you, feel free to submit those questions or to reach out to me at intuitivesoulcollective.com. And then you can go to the page for the podcast. There's a form there, and there's also links to my email where you can submit questions and share even more if you feel called. And I would love to do some of these listener and stories and questions a little bit more frequently. So feel free to submit yours so that we have some good things to share, and I will see a channel and see what comes through for each of them. Okay, so this one comes in from someone named Vanessa, and she said, your videos are so interesting that if one day I doubted, you make me believe there is another life, and which I just find so sweet, and I'm so glad to hear that. And she's talking about her mother who passed a month ago. And this was submitted just a while back, just so you guys know. So this first question comes on in from one of our listeners, and she said that she lost her mother back in November. I'm so sorry to hear that. Even though I'm a medium and I know like we go on long after we die and that we are eternal beings, I know that also the human experiences, it's really hard. It's really hard to have someone pass, and we miss the physical. And I know that it can feel, if it really, for a lot of people, grief is a very real experience, and for myself as well. And so, yeah, I just know that even though the soul is eternal, it can still really hit us hard. Even if we believe in the afterlife, it can be hard not to have our loved one here. So I just want to say that I always hold some space for that as well. So she goes on to say, she said, I cry so much for her, and people say she won't rest in peace if I keep crying. Is that true? And she said, of course I want her to rest in peace, but it's so recent that everything reminds me of her, and I cry so much for her. And she said that her mom came to her in her dreams one time, and she couldn't see her face, and she was wondering why, etc. So I'm going to see if I can pull my guides in on this one. I've got Sam over here, Eric, and I've got, of course, Grace, and then I have got one of my other guides named Molly here to come in and chit chat along with other beings as well who are going to be talking about what is coming through. So they keep saying, so with the part of the question where she said, people said she won't rest in peace if I keep crying, they went total hogwash. Like they were like, nothing could be further from the truth. And they said, your tears express the love that you feel, and the feeling that you have inside of you is valid. And they're showing how important it is to let yourself grieve and to let yourself love. And they said, you wouldn't feel such big love or such huge grief if you didn't already have so much love. So grief is in a sense a celebration of love. Now we don't need to hang on to it and let it like fester. They're saying, so the important thing is actually let yourself cry when you need to, so that emotion doesn't end up suppressed and festering inside of your soul, inside of your body, not in the soul, but in the body. They're showing the heart getting kind of wrapped in it and almost contracting and struggling. And they said, no, like let it out. And they said, your loved one is right there comforting you. No matter who it is, they can come and sit right with you, and you're not holding anything back for them. And they said, we understand that this can be a kind of a belief in certain families or cultures, but we want you to know that the soul is eternal and life continues to truly go on, and your loved ones are not stuck. They never will be, and they never have been, and they cannot be. And what you do or don't do has nothing to do with them moving on. They are their own source energy. So there's nothing you can do to impede them. Okay. And they said, now what we do want you to understand is that you're the one that won't rest in peace if you don't allow yourself the proper grieving process. And so when you hold yourselves back from feeling what you need to feel and processing them, it's kind of like holding yourselves hostage, right? Like it's like you're like, they said, imagine like when we tell a child to stop crying and the child's like, but I'm upset, and they don't know how to emotionally regulate. And emotional regulation is not about making yourself not cry. Just so you guys know, it's not about keeping yourself from being sad. It's more so about just like kind of engaging our emotions, letting them flow, and starting to work with our emotions versus against them. And the irony is that the more you let certain emotions flow and come up and out, the less that they can take hold of you and dictate all of your actions. But they are kind of like there to help to guide you in some sort of sense. So what they want you to know, they said, our dear Vanessa, we want you to know that everything is right as rain with your mother. And they want everyone else out there who's heard such things that your parents get stuck, or they won't leave if you're still thinking about them or whatever. And they said, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, sometimes when we come in really close to comfort you or to say hello or to make contact or leave you a little sign, give you a little hug from spirit, sometimes it does make you cry. And it's because of the tenderness and the love that you feel. And love is to be celebrated. And they said, congratulations on having been able and having such an open heart that you were able to love so deeply in this lifetime. So, oh my gosh, that just made me almost like tear up a little bit. Because I can feel what they're what they're pouring through. I'm like, oh my God. Just so you guys know, yes, psychics and mediums, we do cry for you guys sometimes. So just so you know, we're not like, like you're not hurting us, but yes, we do feel for you guys. Okay, I hope that was super helpful. Oh, and as for the part about her coming through the dream, but her face not showing, Eric said, he's like, this is actually pretty common. And he was like, often when beings come through, especially in an angelic form, you don't see their face right away. And he said some people begin to see their faces more and more, but often like you're not going to see their faces right away. And it's okay. Like as long as, he said, the knowing is what's important and the feeling of comfort and joy. And he said, of course, grief may follow it, but that love that they're bringing you is what's important, not how things look. Okay. So I hope that is helpful. Let me see what the next one is and we'll go from there. Okay, so this person is saying they're asking about twin loss, which I'm sure is a very difficult subject. I can't even imagine. They're saying, ever since my identical twin passed away suddenly and tragically right before we turned 25, I feel like a chunk of my person is gone. 5 years now, and it feels the same. Have you run into any twin deaths that feel the same way with someone on the other side? Or what do they think? Let me see what the guides have to say on this. So I'm seeing a couple sets of twins coming in from the other side, and these are people who have lived in different lifetimes, and they're showing hands, and they said, of course, you feel this way because they said great love lasts a lifetime and beyond. And they said, great love can come in the form of siblings, twins, mother and father, best friends. And they're showing like a boy with his dog. Oh my God. Oh God, they're going to make me cry. They're patting me on the back. They're like, it's okay. It's all right. Let it out. Sometimes if I try to hold it in, especially if I'm talking or doing a reading or a channeling on the podcast, it gets stuck in my throat a little bit, and then it actually gives me a sore throat. Talk about like having an immediate manifestation of trying to suppress an emotion. Okay, so but they're saying these different sets of twins are showing, like they said, in each of our lifetimes, it's really rare for both twins to pass at the same time regardless. And so they're showing like one having outlived the other, but for lengths of time in those lifetimes. So it sounds similar to this person's situation. And they're saying it is very important that you understand that your twin is with you no matter what. That while you may feel that feeling of having like missing their physical experience, they have never left your side, and they never will, and they wouldn't want to even. And they said like, they're not stuck again. Like we don't get stuck here. And they said even if they they wanted to, though, they wouldn't leave. And it's just because of how source energy is, and because we are part of everything and everyone. After we pass, we return to non-physical, meaning we're not bound by any physical form anymore. And they said, like, and even the physical form is kind of like, the bigger part of us isn't physical ever, and it just expresses itself through a physical form, but it doesn't mean it's bound only to that. So they're showing your twins being completely present. And they said, now in the meantime, it is difficult to go through these things, but yes, this type of feeling like someone is missing for a long time or something is missing, it is very common for that feeling to continue to go on. And they're showing keeping connection alive, but also learning to find connection and love in other experiences, while also holding your like a tender spot for your grief. And they're saying it is also important too that this might require a unique type of mental health support. And they always tell me, to tell people, like, grief support, like professional grief support, is always something that you should look into, and mental health support, like therapy and grief counseling and things like that. Like, we love therapy on this podcast and we are huge fans of you guys getting the support that you need to get on earth. And I think we all deserve to have support. So definitely, if you're really struggling with certain things, there's always licensed therapists that can help you with the very specific thing that you are dealing with. And I would say, if you're still really, really, really struggling, and it's been years, and not that grief ever fully goes away, but like, if you're still really struggling and it's really affecting, your mentality and your life, I would definitely look for additional support on that. Okay, our next question comes from Sarah, and she is saying, she has a couple of questions in here, and I think I read through it earlier and I was like, oh, this is so interesting. And she said, she tells her story first, and she says, until a few months ago, I was a skeptic. Growing up, my aunt would share stories of her experiences with spirit and Ouija boards. My grandma would say that she saw orbs when a loved one had passed, or could see their blurry outlines at the foot of her bed at night. Oddly enough, it's only the women in my life who seem to share these experiences. And then she said, my mom passed a few months ago, and it triggered this deep need to connect, to learn more about our consciousness and the true reality of life. Suddenly, I believed it all. It just feels right. Now that I've taken the time to educate myself and speak to mediums, and she said you included, I see synchronicities. I feel the energy change when I attempt to connect with my mom. And she said she's still not at the point where she can feel herself having an active conversation with her. And she said that she sees signs that her and her guides are sending her. So this is really interesting, because she was wondering more so about the history of mediums. And I think I'm going to do more of a full episode on that. I think that would be super, super fun to like dive into even more research on. But she's explaining this process of learning how to channel, and even like channeling animals and stuff like that. And I wanted to jump in and say a couple of these things really makes sense. One is that when she said, oddly enough, it's only the women in my life who seem to share these experiences. That's not odd at all. That's actually incredibly common. It doesn't mean that men aren't channels, or that men and boys cannot, be mediums or psychics. In fact, I've heard of some very good ones, and I know that my son actually channels here and there as well. And he's just like kind of opening that ability up, but he throughout his life has said very psychic things to me. But I did want to say, it's not necessarily like super rare to have men be able to tune in, but a lot of them, I think it's not as supported for men, and there might be a lot of reasons for that. But I also think in terms of spiritual and emotional development, women potentially have more cultural support, especially in certain cultures around these experiences. And I also think women are more likely to talk about them and share them with each other, and I think much more likely to experiment with them, and tend to be, I don't think it's necessarily like right brain or left, but women tend to be a little like less logical, which means being hyper logical with spirituality isn't always very helpful, because the left brain only understands what it can see. So what it knows already is all it thinks there is. And so the part of you that's open-minded, that part of you, the brain that helps you learn, is actually the right brain. So that all said, it's not that uncommon that it's only the women in the family that would have those experiences, though there are families that do have some of the men involved in those experiences as well. In addition, when she said that she was initially more skeptic, but then the door opened for her and she started seeing signs and believing everything and wanting to connect with her mom after she passed, that's also not very, it's not very unusual. Like a lot of people go from being incredibly skeptical to having some sort of event or life experience or loss that causes them to suddenly completely change their belief system and even start trying to channel or reach the other side themselves. Often it starts with visits and they start to get the feeling of a presence. And often it's that loved one that's just kind of like hanging all the time. Sometimes it can happen after an accident or an NDE, which we've done an episode about before, but it's not very, unusual for us to lose someone and to completely change from being skeptics to being complete believers and having full-blown conversations with that person or seeing them and feeling them around, getting signs from them, etc. That is not uncommon at all. I actually have seen people talk about that quite a bit. Often when we have that loved one pass, they want us to know that everything's okay, that they're still here, supporting us and cheering us on, that life goes on and that there's nothing to be scared of. And so they come through quite a bit to comfort us and to contact us and to leave us little clues, signs, songs, all sorts of things, just so that we feel and know that everything's okay and that they're very much still able to be part of our lives just in another way now. I've even seen certain people go so far as to becoming full-blown psychics and mediums after this quote unquote spontaneous awakening happens after they experience a huge loss or have someone move to the other side. And sometimes I even pick up that those souls will have had some sort of arrangement or agreement to an extent. Not everything is set in stone, but sometimes I will pick up that they had an arrangement or an agreement that the one who ended up passing on first was meant to be kind of the awakener or the helper on the other side for many of the people in their life, or even one or two particular people sometimes who are still here. So that's something that I've heard a handful of times over the last almost decade that I've been doing readings. And I do feel like I want to say that just because sometimes we wonder why these things happen, and we're not going to always have all the answers to that type of stuff. I don't think we're meant to. And however, whatever the case may be, I just think it's so wonderful that this person is spending the time connecting with her mom, feeling the energy change, seeing the signs and synchronicities, and that it's bringing them so much more love and peace in the process of grieving. And what a wonderful gift to have, it's just one of those things where it's I don't know. I wish that everyone could have that much relief after a parent's passing. Now, this one's pretty cool because this is actually someone sharing their story. So I'm just going to read it and see if the guides chime in afterward. So this person, Jessie, wrote in and said, I would love to tell my story about stepping into mediumship. It started for me about 17 years ago, but I've been doing mediumship regularly the past 3 years now that I have let go of working, or she's saying, or she was working on letting go of judgment and worrying about what other people think. My first experience was at work when my coworker came in and I had a strong smell of roses fill the room. I told the coworker that she smelled so good and that I loved the smell of roses. She stopped and stared at me, stating that she had nothing on that smelled like roses, but that her mother had just passed that weekend. Without even thinking, I turned to her and said, well, that's your mother telling you she is still with you. From that moment on, I knew our connection to the other side or to that frequency is much different and much closer than we have been taught our entire lives. It brings me so much joy to help people see and realize how close their loved ones are and that they can communicate with them also. My journey since then has been a bit of a roller coaster due to family fears and beliefs around the spirit world, but the growth and strength you build by building a relationship with spirit has helped me step fully into helping others in this way. And then she just said, thank you for your time. I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing this, Jessie. This is so par for the course when you talk about the roller coaster in here. And Eric's over here showing the roller coaster, and he said, you kind of just got to roll with your homies on the other side. He's playing the song, rolling with my homies. And so he said, but it can be kind of a roller coaster. And he said, you did a good job by staying dedicated to your truth, even if, you kind of wanted to fight it a little bit, like the ego part of us wants to fight it, that fear side of us wants to fight. And he said, but it's really good that you're kind of hanging on to your faith. And he said, letting yourself play in the sandbox, letting yourself build the sandcastle and take it down and restart again and see how it can all work. And then he's also saying, he said, what a cool experience to have had. And then Sam's also saying, it's such a beautiful gift to have to give to someone, to be able to say your mom is still with you. And he said, it's almost like right place, right time. That smell came in right at the right time when this coworker came in and her mom had just passed. He said, this is such a beautiful gift to give, especially too, because at work, not everyone is always aware of like people's personal stuff that's going on, or that they just went through a loss, or they don't talk to him about it a lot, but that person's still grieving, even if they're sitting there working and looking fine. So he said, he's showing me it's such a beautiful thing that you gave. They're also saying in terms of mediumship, they said, now you got your mediumship hat on. Now go make good use of it. Go enjoy it. Like go, do what you feel called to do with it. And they're showing so many different ways that we can use mediumship. Like it's not always that we have to be mediums doing readings for others, but they said, but many people feel compelled. They love connecting to the energy. They love giving that gift to other people. They love bringing them hope and joy and tenderness and love. And so they're saying it is such a beautiful gift to give. And they said, make sure that you're taking care of yourselves if you're going to get into this work, because it'll require a little bit more of you. And they're showing like energy. And they said, you'll feel like you stuck your finger in a light socket if you aren't really taking care of your energy systems. And they said, don't do too much at once. And they're elbowing me. And I was like, yeah, that happened to me. And you get pretty frazzled. And so it's important to, like, you can start to feel like you're buzzing too. And it's just a lot. So, but they are saying that this is such a wonderful thing. And yes, things do transform for people when they start to connect to their guides and loved ones on the other side, or to connect with the other side. And they said this is another example of kind of a spontaneous like channeling or awakening, because it was like ever since that moment, this person was like, oh my gosh, wait, this is possible. I do this. Like, I can do this. Can I do this again? Like, and they said psychic smell is a big one. It's one that people don't realize can happen. And it's almost unmistakable though when it does happen, because it's like, where could that have possibly even come from? It just came and went, as fast as it did. So they are saying that congratulations on your big reawakening and on your work. And I keep seeing a crowd on the other side cheering for you, Jessie. just so you know, you are getting some applause from the other side if you ever hear on this podcast. But they are showing mediums and many people, and it's almost like one medium connects with another person through a reading, or even just like conversation like out in the world, and they're showing like them touching this person, tapping the next one with their finger. And they said like almost like passing on the gift. And they said, and then it causes a larger and a larger awakening. And they said, and there's nothing that can stop it. And it's almost like they're showing the rise in consciousness, the change in energy and frequency spreading. And they said, there's no way to stop it. It is what it is. And they said, you guys already hit the tipping point. So this is happening. This is part of the awakening. And they said, it's kind of like one of those extra gifts you get when you go through the awakening. It's not the only purpose of it, but it is a big part of it. Like, it's like, hey, you're going to have more connection to the other side. You're going to have more connection to love and to these higher energies. And they feel really amazing for people. And this is a really important thing to have enhanced because it can help you with discernment too in your daily life. Like if you feel like your spidey senses are off or you don't know what to do, leaning into that higher frequency and leaning into guidance can be really, really co-creative and supportive for you. And in fact, like I would really not recommend you do a lot of co-creating without it, because that's when we often create on autopilot or out of our egos, and then we end up creating things that we don't want to create, even if we think we want them at the time. So yes, they're saying like this is a really beautiful thing and a gift to have given to others. So they're loving that that you're doing this. And they said again, like keep passing on the gift. And they said for the rest of y'all, like pay attention to those little things like the psychic smells when you feel called to say something to someone to comfort them. You think you, like they said, it took a lot of courage for her to say this to the person, just out of like kind of offhandedly, like, hey, like your mom's still with you, with the smell of the roses. And they said, don't hold back. Use your discernment on what you feel, but don't hold back, because you never know who might need those words of wisdom or that little nudge from the other side. So thank you guys all so much for coming to this episode. I thought that this would be a little fun one to do. So if you want more, feel free to submit your stories and questions. I will put the link in the show notes. It's intuitivesoulcollective.com. And also, by the way, now that we're in February, I have a whole bunch of upcoming channelings, videos, classes, book club, which we're doing the Artist's Way, and a lot of channelings and lessons on how to channel prosperity, wealth, and wisdom in the Patreon group this month. You will be able to see what we have scheduled so far and even more to come. If you go to the main Patreon page, there will be a post that says upcoming events for February. And I do also have some extra videos that are going on the free page for those of you guys who want to watch. And then we will also be doing some other fun stuff like workbooks. They have the 2025 energy guide included for free in the Patreon group, so you don't have to purchase it separately if you join, and all sorts of fun stuff in there. We do different discussions. Last week we did our Manifest Fest, and we talked about different levels of consciousness and manifesting and what happens when you shift in and out of different levels. And all of those posts and lessons are still in there for you to read at any time. So there's all sorts of stuff that was posted in the past that's in there, and I will be doing more lives from in that group in the future. So if you want to come and join us in there, please do. I will link that up in the show notes. And yeah, I'm so appreciative that you guys are all here. And I hope that you like this episode. Thanks so much for coming.